Crossover Thursday, Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Vikings. I'm Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks. He's Luke Braun, Locked On Vikings. It is time to get to our keys to victory. And obviously, the Vikings have been very successful at winning football games this year, Luke, winning 12 of their first 14. Very good position to win the NFC North, especially since the Detroit Lions have turned into a real-life MASH unit at this point. It feels like this is for the taking for the Vikings. Still a huge game to make that happen for Minnesota, though, in Seattle. From your perspective, what are the keys to victory for the Vikings to come in, maybe match some of the things that Green Bay did, but where are some areas that you think they absolutely have to hit to beat this Seahawks team playing in the Pacific Northwest?
I'm going to sound like such a boomer. I'm going to sound like so boring here, but it's got to start up front and physicality in the trenches. Seeing that Green Bay game, that's my understanding is let's push them around. Can we push them around? But like I kind of mentioned before, can the Vikings push them around? They've gotten themselves pushed around a little bit by Arizona, by even, units like a lot of backups in Los Angeles pushed them around a little bit. Atlanta pushed them around a little bit. They're kind of not supposed to be able to do that. So yeah, I'm not sure. I think that's like an X factor for me is who gets the physical push, who really can beat each other up. But one thing the Vikings have done all year long, and in every single game they've won, and even the two that they've lost, you've been playing Vikings football, not the other guy's football. You've been playing football predicated on explosives. You have been in, let's make this game decided on how good you are at beating the blitz. The Lions were great at beating the blitz and they won. But it has to be down to that. And, they have not been, they didn't, that game wasn't a Lions game as much as it was a Vikings game. And the Lions went in to US Bank Stadium, played Vikings football and won. Congrats to them. That's a heck of a feat. And I think LA kind of did something similar. I will say the Vikings historically very bad on the West Coast at weird times. That travel, the Pacific time zone change, I think is a genuinely important home field advantage. I'm sure you guys are used to hearing that. But the Vikings haven't won in Seattle since 2006. So they're like that Chester Taylor was the last. Remember the Chester Taylor game? That was the last time they won in Seattle.
Unfortunately, I remember that game really well.
Yeah, almost 20 years ago, that one. It's been that long. And otherwise, it's been a whole bunch of weird primetime games and Action Green and Laquan Treadwell busted coverages and sort of a bunch of weird stuff. The more normal this game can be, the more it's just about finding, 15-yard chunks and like the better things go for the Vikings. But for the Seahawks to take this, they have to prevent the Vikings from making it a Vikings game. They have to, no, we're not going to do this blitz thing, right? You have to find a way to dissuade that blitz. But yeah, that's asking Brian Flores to be a normal person, and that ain't going to happen.
Yeah, from Seattle's perspective on defense, I'm basing this off of watching a ton of Sam Darnold over the years, and I feel like even this season, as well as he has played, when opponents have been able to create interior pressure up front, that is where the interceptions and the bad decisions are coming from Sam Darnold. And I look at Seattle's front. You mentioned the physicality. For one quarter, and that ended up being a huge difference. I don't know what happened to Seattle in that first quarter. That was not the Seahawks defense I'd seen the last 4 weeks. They held Josh Jacobs to 21 rushing yards in the last 2 quarters, though. That is the defense that I have been watching.
So they found it.
They found it. Leonard Williams is having an all-pro season. The dude has been absolutely unblockable at times. And even in that game against Green Bay, he had 4 tackles netting 1 or fewer yards in the second half by himself. He's got 7 sacks. If he can create problems for that interior line that, as you mentioned, is having a harder time keeping Sam Darnold clean as of late, if Leonard Williams can create pressure, and Jaron Reed has had a good season, hasn't had the sack numbers, but he's been effective. Byron Murphy, second, is starting to play better. To me, that is the biggest key, is if they can get pressure on Sam Darnold with their interior pass rush, that takes away some of those explosives because your pocket is collapsing down on you, and those long developing routes can't get open. So I think that is going to be key. And on offense, you mentioned being boring. Look, my listeners at this point are probably like, dude, stop saying it. It's not going to happen, but run the damn football. I am so tired of watching this team week in, week out. If 1 or 2 runs don't work, you know what? We're just going to turn into an air raid offense. Throw it.
Vikings have, by EPA per play, the best run defense in the league right now.
But I think Seattle cannot come into this game and say, we're just going to sling it all over the place. Especially with
you're going to have to. Like, they do stop the run. You're going to have to eat a 2-yard run and say, we're sticking with it if you're going to stick with it.
You've got to continue running the football. And look, like I said, they ran for 170-plus yards. Arizona's run defense was the number one run defense in the previous 5 games when they did that. That is a physical football team, and they were pushing them around. You've got to play some bully ball in Seattle. And I think that the offensive line has shown in flashes recently they can do that, but the offensive coordinator's got to let those guys lather up, and he has not been willing to do that. So those are the 2 big keys to me. Interior pressure on Sam Darnold. I think if they do that, it really takes away a lot of the things the Vikings like to do, and it can really stir up some panic from Sam Darnold, even at this stage of his career. He still will throw some picks and make some throws that are gambles because he's a risk taker. And you have a opportunistic secondary, and I think they have to run the ball. I'm not saying they need to run for 170 yards, but they have to run the football and stick with it and get some play action opportunities to take some pressure off Geno, because he's not going to be 100% either. You've got to have your run game going so that you can get some of that passing game going that Seattle should be able to do, when they have not consistently been able to get going this year, because I think Ryan Grubb has not helped them by simply saying, hey, you know what, run game is optional. I don't care. You can't do that in this football game.
So 2 pass happy teams. The Vikings do that too. I mean, they will go an entire quarter and run the ball twice. And that's not like not sticking with it. The run game will be working plenty well. And Kevin O'Connell just gets into 7-on-7 mode and is just like, but what if we tried to throw a touchdown 3 times? Let's do that. And then sometimes they do throw a touchdown 3 times. And it's like, okay, well, I can't argue with you now. But
Seattle hasn't had that success. So
yeah, I mean, that's, I think, a huge difference. And that's why, Seattle's looking at a wild card, and the Vikings are currently trying to play for the 1 seed, although they might both end up in a wild card if we're looking at that. But over under for this game at FanDuel is 43.5. 2 pass happy teams, over under 43.5. Kind of like that over, yeah?
You would think, but Seattle has played so many games that have been higher than that on over under, and then it's gone way under. And the defense has played really well, other than the first quarter last week. They have been dominant. Right. I mean, the 4 games before that, they gave up 13.7 points per game, and they scored 2 touchdowns on defense. I mean, this has been a unit that's not only been stopping people, they've been scoring points themselves. The Seahawks have scored more than 20 points in one of their last 5 games with their offense, though. And with the weapons they have, the quarterback they have, again, I have to keep pointing to the play caller, because it's like at some point you got to say, you got to be able to help your offensive line. And I think he's done the exact opposite. Ryan Grubb has got to show that he is willing to make adaptations. And the talent is there that this offense can put points on the board. We just haven't seen it happen this year. It just hasn't come together. So is this the game that it does? I don't know that I'm optimistic necessarily about that, but they're going to have to score some points because Minnesota's going to score points. I would go slightly over on that, but I think that the defense for the Seahawks is going to be kind of ticked off after last week, the way that first quarter went. Wouldn't be shocked if the weather comes into play too.
3-point spread right now. Vikings favored by 3 on the road. That was more when it looked like Geno was maybe not going to play, but with Geno Smith practicing in full, probably he's coming in, and that line comes down a little bit to -3. If Vikings fans know, you don't want to take my gambling advice. Okay, so I'm going to sit this one out, but I'll say it comes down to explosive plays and physicality, which is pretty boilerplate. But I would say that whoever wins up front is going to have that nice ability, keep their QB clean, start pushing the ball down the field, and eventually even good corners mess up.
If Seattle runs the football, and I know this is so generic, but if Seattle runs more than 35% of the time in this game, and they are able to at least have a little bit of success doing that, and they can create
Ben Baldwin just felt a disturbance in the force.
Yeah. They've got to play with that physicality you mentioned on both sides of the ball, creating pressure with their D-line, and they've got to have some semblance of a run game. If they can do those two things, I think that they can cover this, but they have been so bad at home most of this year. That has been the weird thing about this team. They have been phenomenal on the road. They have looked like a team that don't want to play in the playoffs. They come back to Lumen, and I don't know if they need to start taking them on a bus from their practice facility to make it feel like
get them up in a plane and circle a couple times. And
yeah, they are playing so flat to begin games at home, and then that leads to the Packers fans last week screaming, "Go Pack, go!" because the Seahawks fans are like, "We're getting our butts kicked. Like, this isn't fun." they have taken the crowd out of it. And that's a huge advantage for this team. So they've got to be able to start faster. I don't know what the solution is to that. There's a lot of things that have to happen because I think Minnesota is the better team. If Seattle plays at their best, I certainly can see them winning this one. But there had to be some significant things go their way for me to not say the Vikings are going to cover that just because of what I've seen. I guess we'll find out on Sunday, though, because the Seahawks have been as unpredictable as any team in the league. We don't know what we're going to see. Maybe we see the team that won 4 games in a row and they make this really interesting. Or we see the team from last weekend and Minnesota is just laughing their way to a blowout win. I guess we'll find out when we get there on Sunday.